Good to have you with us here on News. When we start hearing a deputy finance minister saying, "I'm not lying, prove it," it's not asking questions. But many of the unions this evening are saying, we want him gone.
Let's take a step back. The reason why they want him gone is because his testimony at the PIC inquiry is contradicting what we've heard from two PIC board members. Now, you must remember that Mondli Gungubele is the Deputy Finance Minister and automatically becomes the chairperson of the PIC board. And he testified last week, Monday, and he said that there was no pressure to resign from the PIC board, and it was a unanimous decision that the board took because of the allegations that have been levelled against various board members. Then on Tuesday you had, or it was actually the same day, Monday, you had a former board member, Dudu Klatshwayo, saying, we were actually forced to resign. We were told if we do not resign today, which was, that date was the 1st of Feb, we will be fired within 3 days. And that was completely different to what we heard from Gungubele. The next day we heard from another former board member, Sandra Beswick, and she said, we were forced to resign. We were told we have to resign. And that morning, the evidence leader actually stood up and said he contacted Gungubele and asked him, were you actually forced to resign or not? I want to see the drafts of that minutes, the drafts of the meeting, to find out whether or not you were forced, what actually happened, what was said, was there a fight? And he said, actually, we were forced to resign. The minister did say that, we should look within ourselves and we should do some introspection, and maybe it's best that we take a step back. So, that's very different to what he said on the Monday. And this is why there's just so much confusion and so much contradiction, because you had two board members testifying last week where their evidence corroborated, saying that we were forced to resign, the Deputy Finance Minister saying, no, we weren't, and then coming back and saying, actually, we were.
And considering what is happening with the Finance Ministry at the moment and the scrutiny it's being put under, not just under the PIC inquiry, but we also have what's happening as far as the state capture inquiry, all of this links in, and the credibility around ministers is now being brought into question. We have a well-known Labour Federation now coming in and saying, don't even step aside while the investigation is being done. Heidi, they're saying, we want you gone. You've destroyed the credibility of the Finance Ministry. Exactly,
and when you have a situation where the Deputy Finance Minister, who should be a trusted body to represent the PIC board, to represent government employees' pension funds, and to ensure that the Public Investment Corporation operates at a very credible and functional level, contradicting himself and actually saying, well, I said this and now I'm saying this, and I mean, from that soundbite that we heard previously, he's saying he didn't lie. But if in hindsight, the truth wasn't told initially when you were under oath at the PIC inquiry and you were asked, were you forced to resign? And he said it was a unanimous decision and we decided to take a step back. And then when you hear from different former board members saying, no, we were given an ultimatum, we either resign or we get fired. And then he comes back and he says, actually. So unions are going to be up in arms because at the end of the day, it's also government employees' pension funds that are put at risk here. And if you have a Deputy Finance Minister that's contradicting his evidence and statements in front of an inquiry, that does raise major red flags.
Yeah, many people I see on social media, and I know you do follow these conversations, Heidi, around the PIC on social media, saying there's a very big difference between lying and omitting very important information. And I think people are getting caught up on these technicalities. But tell me, if you could, about this whistleblower, this James Nogu. This is where it all seems to come back from. I think it's so important for viewers to understand how we got to the point where we have two PIC board members saying, no, well, we were told to go away. You've got the Deputy Finance Minister saying it was an amicable discussion, and you've got this James Nogu. Who is James Nogu?
Before I say who James Nogu is, I think in my next life I'm going to be like a special investigator to figure out who James Nogu actually is. But the drama actually unfolded when at the PIC when James Nogu sent emails. So we saw that emails were sent to PIC board executives, top management at the PIC by the names of James Nogu. And that's when allegations were levelled against the former CEO, back then he was the CEO, Dan Machile, about giving a loan to an alleged lover. And then you had emails recently resurfacing saying that Mondli Gungubele with another board member are trying to capture the PIC. So James Nogu has been a hot potato in this whole PIC inquiry because nobody can understand who he is. The PIC themselves do not understand how he got access to very vital and key confidential documents of the PIC, how they have access to all this information, and where they're getting all these allegations from. And the PIC actually got in a forensic team to try and figure out who James Nogu is, and they themselves couldn't even find out who James Nogu is because they couldn't get a subpoena from the police, because the police said that they would rather try and figure out if those allegations are true instead of trying to find out who is the face behind those emails. And they've resurfaced now. James Nogu sent emails earlier this year, and this is why the PIC board has decided to step back, and that's why they resigned. So serious allegations. The inquiry is trying to understand who James Nogu is. We all just want to know who James Nogu is.
He could be one of those names that comes up without a face ahead of the elections, because we now have the Deputy Finance Minister, we have the President of the country, President Ramaphosa, who's trying to save face, from a state perspective, and he's now talking about government pension funds. He's talking about state security for financing. And now we have a thing like this coming. Zwelinzima Vavi is a man, of course, many people will know is very outspoken. This has a political tone. It has a political undertone to it. And I imagine the president this evening watching you talk to me is going to be a very, very worried man as we head up to May 8th. This could have very serious ramifications on the ground for elections. It begins to show, analysts and critics will say, that the president doesn't seem to have control of what's going on.
And this is why we see so many commissions of inquiries taking place.
Right.
Previously, we saw the SARS Commission of Inquiry. That report was released. We saw the Mokgoro inquiry, the Zondo Commission, and now the PIC inquiry. And the reason why the president has obviously taken these steps ahead of an election year, in an election year, is because we need to understand where all this money has gone to. Why, for example, specifically in the PIC, why the PIC invested into specific companies, why government employees' pension funds were put at risk, why the PIC invested into Steinhoff and nothing's been done about all that money lost. VBS Mutual Bank, AO Technology, which has now been told to give the PIC the money back. So it's a major, major issue that the president has to deal with, because it's putting the most vulnerable at risk. It's government employees' pension funds. You work all your life as a civil servant, and then the day you retire, possibly you don't have the money that you thought you would because the PIC invested in very questionable companies.
And having now seen what Gungubele has said in that soundbite before we started speaking, what comes up this week? Because bombs are being dropped as far as the state capture inquiry, now the PIC as well. Now what are we looking at coming up this week?
So unfortunately, we do not know who's going to testify. All witnesses have been placed under witness protection because of the death threats that have been circulating. And the Commission has decided that they'll rather protect the witnesses instead of naming them a day before, a week before, possibly putting them at risk. So unfortunately, we do not know who is set to testify. But we did hear from the Commission last week. They sent out a statement to say that there's been major concern about why the inquiry has only been focusing on the AO Technology Solutions deal, which is a company that is part owned by Iqbal Survey, and the PIC invested 4.3 billion rand into that company, and it was a very questionable investment by the PIC. But they have mentioned that they will look into the investment of Steinhoff, VBS Mutual Bank, and other various companies that have obviously put government employees' pension funds at risk. So we do not know any names as yet, but we do know it's set to get quite explosive, because we're going to hear why the PIC invested into those companies.
And just off the back of those names you've mentioned, this is going to be a long time coming. This could well be leading into the elections and post the elections. Heidi Jokos, thank you very much indeed. You can continue to follow her on social media as well. Regular updates here on ENCA as she continues to unpack and provide insight of the PIC inquiry. It's our very own Heidi Jokos.